Good day to each and everyone, especially to our dearest and ever gorgeous Ma'am Hyra Dave Hempeso, our Jack 8 Ethics instructor. So, a pleasant afternoon to you, ma'am. So, we are the group 4 who was assigned to tackle about or to report virtue ethics. So, what is virtue ethics? So, what are the words that comes into your mind when you hear the word virtue ethics? But before that, let us know the objectives of this chapter or lesson. So number 1. So at the end of this lesson, we will be able to discuss the meaning and basic principles of virtue ethics. Second, to distinguish virtuous act from non-virtuous acts. And third, apply Aristotle ethics in understanding the Filipino character. So, before we go on to our formal discussion, let us first separate the meaning of virtue from ethics. So, virtue is moral excellence. A virtue is a trait or quality that is deemed to be morally good, and thus is valued as a foundation of principle and good moral being. So in other words, it is a behavior that shows high moral standards. So it is high moral standards, or doing what is right and avoiding what is wrong. So virtue is only about doing what is right and avoiding what is wrong. So I have here some words that corresponds to the term virtue. First is hope, justice, loyalty, love, creativity, commitment, dependability, gratitude, grace, and other. So next is the word ethics. So ethics is based on well-founded standards. So it is a standards of right and wrong. So we have here right and wrong that prescribe what humans ought to do, usually in terms of rights, obligations, benefits to society, fairness, or specific virtues. So, ethics and virtues is all about doing what is right. So, bisag i-separate na to yung meaning, but i-separate na to silang duha, but virtue and ethics corresponds to do what is right from wrong. So, also I have here words that corresponds to ethics. So naatay honor, principle, honesty. So honesty is everywhere dyan. Fairness, responsibilities, and many more. So we have here virtue ethics. So ato na siyang itapot. So this virtue ethics is the ethical framework. So it is a framework. So we all know that framework is a standard. So mura siya og kana bitong So it is just more siya layout. So framework means layout, ethical layout. So that is concerned with understanding the good as a matter of developing the virtuous character of a person. So it also focuses on the formation of one's character, brought about determining and doing virtuous acts. So ang virtuous acts is concerned about doing what is right and wrong. So mo na siya. So virtue ethics is a person rather than action based. It looks at the virtue or moral character of a person carrying out action rather than an ethical duties, the rules or the consequences of particular actions. Virtue ethics not only deals with the rightness or wrongness of individual actions, it provides guidance as to the sort of characteristics and behavior a good person will seek to achieve. So in that way, virtue ethics is concerned with the whole of a person's life rather than particular episodes or actions. So I have here example. So approaching a level crossing, approaching a level crossing, a man noticed a girl tied to the tracks. So ang usa daw ka lalaki na siya nakitaan ng isa ka babae nga na tied to the tracks kana bitong kuan sa train kanang naimurag nagianan sa train. A train is fast approaching and it's obvious the driver hasn't seen the girl. So paspas ang pagdagan sa train without knowing nga naay babae di ay dito nga nasabod sa tracks. So Aristotle would say that the man should show courage. He wouldn't tell him what to do. So according to Aristotle, ang man daw should show courage. Kanang dili na bitaw siya ingnon kung unsa pa ang iyahang buhaton, tabangan na niya dritso ang bae because the girl is in danger. So kung maligsan siya sa train, lata pusa siya. So as a person, kung naayhing ana nga mga situation, kailangan dili ta mo wag tayong mag-atubili. So in Tagalog pa, wag tayong mag-atubiling tumulong sa kapwa kapag kung sino man yung nangangailangan. So in that way, atong ma-exercise ang atong for being a virtuous person. Kanang we don't need to dili ta kailangan maghulat kung unsay ihatag sa ato pabalik sa atong gitabang. So we don't have to kanang maghulat. Next is we would need to decide for ourselves what we think the most courageous act would be, and that is in this situation, and that is to help. So how does a person develop virtues? So giunsa daw sa tao pag-develop sa virtues? So virtues are developed through learning and through practice. So learning and through practice. So remember that. Through learning and through practice. As the ancient philosopher Aristotle suggested, a person can improve his or her character by practicing self-discipline, while a good character can be corrupted by repeated self-indulgence. So just as the ability to run a marathon develops through much training and practice, so does our capacity to be fair, to be courageous, or to be compassionate. So we have two major thinkers of ancient Greece, and this is Plato and Aristotle. So kinsa di ay ni si Plato? Kaila ba mo ani? Is this your lolo or your uncle and your neighbor? So let us try to know who is Aristotle. So murag kaila man jud tani tanan ni. So Aristotle was born in Macedonia and studied philosophy under Plato in Athens. So si Aristotle, by the way, is a student of Plato. So he was considered to be the brightest among Plato's students in the former school, the Academy. He later founded his own school, Lyceum, where he became a very productive intellectual, having written numerous works on different topics such as the theoretical and practical sciences and logic. He was also known to be the tutor of Alexander the Great, who tried to conquer the world. Aristotle's Nicomachean Ethics is his major work in moral philosophy. Aristotle was one of the greatest philosophers who ever lived and the first genuine scientist in the history. So he made pioneering contribution to all fields of philosophy and science. He invented the field of formal logic, and he identified the various scientific disciplines and explored their relationship to each other. The Nicomachean Ethics was the first book ever written on ethics. So, and still one of the greatest and most influential. It is meant to be practical, to teach us to be virtuous more than to understand what virtue is. Aristotle assumes that all our actions aimed at some end are good, that our ends form a hierarchy, and that there is one ultimate end. So the highest good is that at which all actions aim. It must be an end itself, self-sufficient and attainable. As happiness alone satisfies these conditions, happiness alone is our highest good. So, uh, next is we have Plato. So Plato is an ancient Greek philosopher, was a student of Socrates. So Plato put he was a student of Socrates and a teacher of Aristotle, just like what I said. His writing explored justice, beauty, and equality, and also contained discussion in aesthetics, political philosophy, theology, cosmology, epistemology, and the philosophy of language. So Plato founded the Academy in Athens, one of the first institutions of higher learning in the Western world. He founded the Academy in Athens. His work on philosophy, politics, and mathematics were very influential and laid the foundation for Euclid's systematic approach to mathematics. So Aristotle's discourse of ethics departs from the Platonic understanding of reality and conception of the good. So Plato and Aristotle affirm rationality as the high faculty of a person, and having such characteristic enables a person to realize the very purpose of their existence. So, but they differ in their appreciation of reality and nature, which in turn results in their contrasting stand on what the principle should be. So lahi-lahi jud ang tao, we have lahi ang iyang pagsabot sa usa ka butang, and then lahi just like what Aristotle and Plato did. So para daw kay Plato, the real is outside the realm of any human sensory experience, but can somehow be grasped by one's intellect. The truth and ultimately the good are in the spare forms of ideas transcending daily human condition, while kang Aristotle, he believed that real is found within our everyday encounter with objects in the world. What makes nature intelligible is its character of having both form and matter. Therefore, the truth and the good cannot exist apart from the object and not independent of our experience. So the next slide would be happiness and ultimate purpose, to be reported by Isa Campomanes and Christian Breva.
Happiness and ultimate purpose. Aristotle begins his discussion of ethics by showing that every act that a person does is directed toward a particular purpose, aim, or what the Greek code tells us. There is a purpose why one does something, and for Aristotle, first, the person's action manifests a good that she aspires for. Every pursuit of a person hopes to achieve a good. One eats for purpose of a good that is gives sustenance to the body. Second, a person pursues a chosen career, aiming for a good, that is, to provide a better future for her family. Third, a person will not do anything which is not beneficial to her. Even a drug user thinks that as a substance abuse will cause her good. This does not necessarily mean that using drugs is good, but a drug addict would want to believe that such act is good. Therefore, for Aristotle, the good is considered to be the telos or purpose for which all acts seek to achieve. Aristotle is aware that one does not act not only to achieve a particular purpose, but also believes such purpose can be utilized for a higher goal or activity, which then can be used to achieve an even higher purpose, and so on. In other words, the different goods that one purposes for a hierarchy of telo, or a plural form of telos. Aristotle says, but a certain difference is found among ends. Some are activities, others are products apart from the activities that produce them. Where there are ends apart from the actions, It is the nature of products to be better than the activities. Now, as there are many actions, arts, and sciences, their aims are also many. The aim of medical art is health, that of shipbuilding of vessels, that of strategy victory, that of economics wealth. In all of this, the ends of the matter, arts, are to be preferred to all the subordinate ends, for it's for the sake for the former that the latter is pursued. Aristotle discusses the general criteria in order for one to recognize the highest good of man. First, the highest good of a person must be final. As a final end, it is no longer utilized for the sake of arriving at the much higher end. For example, the purpose of remembering the lessons in the course, that is why one writes down notes. It is not the final end because it is clear that such purpose is aimed at achieving a much higher goal. Second, the ultimate telos of a person must be self-sufficient. Satisfaction in life is arrived at once this highest good is attained. Nothing else is sought after and desired. Once is a self-sufficient goal is achieved. Since it is already considered as the best possible goal in life. Again, the goal of remembering the lessons in the course is not yet the best possible good because a person can still seek for one more satisfying goals in her life. According to Aristotle, older individuals would agree that the highest purpose and the ultimate good of a man is happiness, or for the Greeks, eudaimonia. Aristotle says, now, such a thing, happiness, above all else, is held to be, for this is we choose always for itself and never for the sake of something else, but honor, pleasure, reason, and every virtue we choose indeed for themselves. For if nothing resulted from them, we should still choose each of them, but we choose them also for the sake of happiness, judging that by means of them we shall be happy. Happiness, on the other hand, no one chooses for the sake of this, or, in general, for anything other than itself.
Hi, I'm Christian Breva. My report is the continuation of a report of Miss Isa Compomanes. One can therefore say that happiness seems to fit the first criterion of being the final end of human being. For it is clear that conditions for having wealth, power, and pleasure are not chosen for themselves, but for the sake of being means to achieve happiness. We are a human being. We all want to be a happy person, and that's the reason why we are achieving that goal in life. How do we define happiness? What is the ultimate purpose of happiness in life? According to Aristotle, the main purpose of a life is to be happy. So according to him, when you talk about happiness, ultimate purpose, he stated, we are all make something because we have our own purposes. Dili daw ta makahimo og purpose kung walay something. That's why we are doing something because we have our own purpose in life. Therefore, we are not doing something to destroy our life. We do something because we think it is beneficial for us. Happiness for Aristotle is the only self-sufficient aim that can aspire for. No amount of wealth or power can be more fulfilling than having achieved the condition of happiness. One can imagine a life of being wealthy, powerful, and experiencing pleasurable feelings, and yet such is still not satisfying without happiness. Once happiness is achieved, things such as a wealth, power, and pleasurable feelings just give valued added benefits in life. The true measure of well-being for Aristotle is not by means of richness or fame, but by the condition of having attained a happy life. Even though older individuals agree that happiness is the highest and good the humans aspire for, there are various opinions on what specifically is the nature of the ultimate telos of a person. One is that happiness is attached with having wealth and power. Others associable happiness with feelings that are pleasurable. Some take nobler things like honor and other ideals as constitutive of happiness. For Aristotle, are going for or against every opinion proves to be futile attempt to arrive at the nature of happiness. Instead, Aristotle shows that one can arrive at the ultimate good by doing one's function well. How does a person arrive at her highest good? According to Aristotle, if an individual's action can achieve the highest good, then one must investigate how she functions, which enables her to achieve her ultimate purpose. If she performs her function well, then she is capable of arriving at happiness. Aristotle then proceeds with discussing the function of human beings to distinguish one person's activity from other beings. For Aristotle, what defines human beings is her function or activity of reason. This function makes her different from the rest of beings. Aristotle expressed this clearly. What defines a person, therefore, is her function or activity of reason. A person's action to be considered as truly human must be an act that is always in accordance to reason. The function of a human being is to act following the dictates of her reason. Any person, for that matter, utilizes his reason, but Aristotle further says that person cannot perform her function, but she can also perform it well. Okay, for example, a dancer becomes different from a chief because of her function to dance, while the chief's is to cook. Any dancer can dance, but what makes her distinct from excellent dancer is that the latter dances very well. The same principle applies to human beings. What distinguishes a good person from other human beings is her rational activity that is performed well or excellently. A good individual, therefore, stands closer to meeting the conditions of happiness. Her actions are a higher purpose. Now, if the function of a man is an activity of a soul, which follows or implies a rational principle, and if we say a so and so and a good soul have a function which is the same time. Okay, lastly, the local says, madaling maging tao, mahirap magpakatao. Can be understood in the light of Aristotle thoughts on the function of a good person. Any human being can perform the activity of reason. Thus being human is achievable. However, a good human being strives hard and doing an activity in an excellent way. Therefore, the task of being human becomes more difficult because doing such activity well takes more effort on the part of the person. So, when we say madaling maging tao, mahirap magpakatao, means in this life, there were no perfect and we are not perfect. So, there are so many consequences that we need to deal with, and in order to deal that circumstances, we also stand for our own. We should know our capacity as a person and where we stand. As a human being, we should know our basis and limitation. As a person, we should always deal our different perspective and focus to reflect our own. Thank you.
Virtue is moral excellence, or it is a trait or quality that is deemed to be morally good and thus is valued as a foundation of principle and good moral being. It is a behavior that shows high moral standards, which doing what is right and avoiding what is wrong. So in Greek word, it is called arete. So virtue means that it is a concept of something that makes its possessor good. So we can only say that he or she is a virtuous person if that particular person deemed to be morally good and keeps doing right and keeps also avoiding what is wrong. So if one person keeps doing or acting wrong, so we can say that he or she is virtuous. The goodness of a person is the meaning of arete, or the virtue by the Greek. So one does not become an excellent person overnight, for one swallow does not make a summer, nor does one day, and so too one day, or short time does not make a man blessed and happy, according to Aristotle. So this means that being a virtuous cannot be accomplished by a single act. Therefore, being an excellent individual works on doing well in her day-to-day existence. So this means that being an excellent individual works on doing well in her day-to-day existence, and one person can be called as a virtuous if he or she continues and keep doing good, not just for example. Karon ako nagbuhat ko og matarong or good act, pero pagkaugma or unya na pod nagbuhat na sad ko og dili maayo. So you can't call me as a virtuous person because I'm still doing bad act or dili maayo nga mga butang. So, here are some examples of doing or acting virtuous. Example of these are honesty, second is courage, third is compassion, fourth is generosity, fifth is integrity, sixth is fairness, seven is self-control, and eight is prudence. So, they are the basic qualities necessary for our well-being and happiness. Excellence is an activity of human soul, according to Aristotle. So, these 8 examples given here are the examples of being a virtuous act. So, if we are going to do virtuous act, or if we like to be a virtuous person, we need to act like these all examples here given. So, there are 2 human soul. So, the human soul is divided into 2 parts, according to Aristotle. First is the irrational element, and second is rational faculty. So, the irrational element is part of man is not in the realm where virtue is exercised, because as the term suggests, it cannot be dictated by reason. And the second is rational faculty. The rational faculty of man exercises excellence in him. So one can rightly or wrongly apply the use of reason in this part. So in rational faculty, one can rightly or wrongly apply the use of reason in this part. Okay. There are 2 aspects of irrational element. First is the vegetative aspect, and second is the appetitive aspect. The first aspect, which is the vegetative, functions as giving nutrition and providing the activity of physical growth in a person. And the second is the appetitive aspect, which means it works as a desiring faculty of man. And an act of desiring in itself is an impulse that naturally runs counter to reason and most of all the time refuses to go along with reason. The 2 different aspects of irrational element and the differences. There are also 2 aspects of rational faculty. The first aspect is moral, the second aspect is intellectual. The first aspect, which means the first aspect, which is moral, means concerns the act of doing. And the second, which is the intellectual, concerns the act of knowing. So there are difference between that two. So intellectual, one rational aspect where a person can attain as excellence. So this excellence is attained through teaching. Through time, one learns from the vast experiences in life where she gains knowledge on these things, and one learns can gain wisdom by being taught or by learning, according to Aristotle. So the difference between these two is moral concerns the act of doing or something what we do, and intellectual concerns the act of knowing or what we say, the act of knowing. Okay, so there are two ways by which can attain intellectual as excellence. The first is philosophical wisdom, and the second is practical wisdom. So the first, intellectual excellence, which means the philosophical wisdom, means that this deals with attaining knowledge about the fundamental principles and truths that govern the universe. And the second is the practical wisdom, which means it is an excellence in knowing the right conduct in carrying out a particular act. And also, practical wisdom means in carrying out a morally virtuous life, and one needs the intellectual guide of practical. So, that is the difference between the two intellectual excellence. In carrying out a morally virtuous life, one needs the intellectual guide of practical wisdom in steering the self toward the right choices and actions in itself. Having practical wisdom or the excellence in knowing what to act upon does not make someone already morally virtuous. So this means that this is the statement of Aristotle. So according to Aristotle, this is why some say that all the virtues are forms of practical wisdom, and why Socrates, in one respect, was on the right track while in another he went astray in thinking that all the virtues were forms of practical wisdom. He was wrong, but in saying they implied practical wisdom, he was right. This is confirmed by the fact that even now all men, when they define virtue after naming the state of character and its involves constant training and endless hours of shooting and dribbling the ball to the right way until one habitually does the right stroke in shooting the ball and the right tempo in dribbling the ball. It is only when he or she properly plays basketball consistently that she will be recognized as a good basketball player. Same is true with moral virtue. A moral person habitually chooses the good and consistently does good deeds. It is in the constant act of choosing and doing the good that a person is able to form her character. It is through one character that others know a person. So the example here means that for us to become a virtuous person, or for us to likely to become that one, so we need to act and practice those examples I given moment ago. So that is the eight examples of the virtuous act, and we need to apply that those all for us to become a virtuous one. So that is the way for us to become a virtuous person. Okay, so here is the last question. How does the continuous exposure to violence on television affect the kind of character that children will develop? The connection of this one, that the exposure to violence on television affect children's development, because if the children will watch violence, or if the parents will let children watch violence or exposure to violence on television, they are just thinking that it is normal or it is just good. So there is a connection between that act. They are just imitating what the parents or what their guardians do, what are they are doing. So if the parents or the guardians let them watch that violence or exposure to violence on television, they are just thinking that it is just normal and it is just okay to watch that, but it is non-moral. So that is the connection between that exposure to violence on television with that particular virtuous act person. That's all.
Moral virtues and methods. According to Aristotle, developing a practical wisdom involves learning from experiences. So it means by our learnings and experiences in everyday life, we developing our practical wisdom. So by the way, what is practical wisdom means? Practical wisdom means knowing how to balance conflicting aims and principles. This kind of wisdom acknowledges that uncertain risk cannot be eliminated, but guides us in becoming wiser about how we manage it. So practical wisdom develops out of what we learn from our experiences. When practical wisdom guides the conduct of making morally right choices and actions, what does it identify as the proper and right thing to do? So let me continue discuss about methods. The methods is the mean between two extremes which are excess and deficiency. So, ang methods kuno kay siya ang naa sa middle or center nga gipatungan sa behavior or vices nga deficiency and excess. So, what does excess mean? Excess is an action or conduct that goes beyond the usual, reasonable, or lawful limit. An amount of something that is more than necessary, permitted, or desirable. While deficiency is a lack or shortage. Meaning, dako siya o kulang. Kung ang excess is nanobra, ang deficiency is a lack or shortage. And mosets means gabalance na siya. Wala na siya nagkulang, wala na po siya nag-excess. So, ang methods di ay kuno kay mao ato ang virtue. So, kabaluta og unsay sakto or unsay sayo. Like for example, medto kog mall. Nya sa mall, daghan jud biya kayo mga manintal sa imong mga mata like sa mga gipang display. Sa mga gipang display dira, so mga may ganyo jud ka, di ba? Na kay daghang kwarta pero ang importanteng palito nun is mangumpra ra kasi imong 1 month na pang konsumo. Yes, ako adjuning na experience samot katong grade 11 pa ko boarding ako. So sa una padal-an mi kwarta sa mga parents. So dapat kabalo jud ka motipid no. Kabalo jud ka mo balance sa imong needs and wants sa pang-adlaw-adlaw na to. So katong sa dihang naami sa mall, nakita na nako ang mga grabe kanay sa mga butang og may ganyo jud ka. Ug ako nang na kung ako running labyan, basta maulhay ko uso ba. Di ba? Uso pa kay sa una nga mag-uso ta og unsay kuan uso karon. So ing ana jud biya na musabay jud sa uso. Ug ako nang nako mangumpra ko daan sa akong needs sa akong mga kinahanglan jud kayo. Klaro jud kayo na masubraan pa jud akong kwarta. So, ang akong nuhuna guys, ang akong nuhunan guys, na kung mupalit ko, yes, pwede kayo kung makapalit ana kay naa pa ko'y kwarta nga sobra. But, napoy mo hunghong nako na ayaw kay dili ka na importante kaayo og hunahunaa ang sa sunod na po ni higayon. Basin daghan pa kang mas kinahanglanon sa sunod higayon og dili na hinuon nimo mapalit ang sa sunod tungod kay giuna nimo ang wants or imuhang kagustuhan ug dili kayo importante nimo. So ang akong gibuhat is gilabyan na lang jud nako ang katong akong na gustuhan og nangumpra ko sa akong 1 month na konsumo guys. So guys, dapat day no kabaluta mo handle sa situation no, dapat kabaluta unsay right or wrong ug dapat kabaluta magunaw na sa atong future dili lang kay magpataka. Bisan na nanubra na hala palit. Bisan og daghan na kag sanina hala gapalit ang Japon ka. Bisag dili importante hala palit ka. Napoy uban na mupalit man siya mga kinahanglanon sa iyang kaugalingon pero kulang ra pod. So mo na gitawag og deficiency. Katong ganina nga bisan og daghan pa kayong gamit hala gapalit bisag dili importante. So mo na gi-example sa excess. So mo na gitawag og deficiency behavior ang kato ang nag-lack or nagkulang siya. So na-over po siya guys nga dili na siya mo palit sa iyang kinahanglanon. So dapat guys dili ka dapat mulapas, dili pod ka dapat magkulang. So mo na example sa methods guys. Dapat ang methods is wala ka nagkulang o wala pod ka na nubra. So dapat balance lang ay mohang pagpan. So mo na methods guys. Mo na example sa methods. So, mo na to'y kalainan sa deficiency, methods, and excess guys. So, methods again is what practical wisdom identifies as the right action and the middle measure of an action, feeling, or passion. Then, nothing is lacking or too much from an act that is morally good. So, mo na siya ang example sa methods guys. A morally virtuous person. Virtues are applied morals that was promote individual and collective well-being. So for example, being generosity. Generosity means that quality of being willing to share, the kindness and willingness to share. Like for example, you shared extra foods and supplies to shelters. And another example is being compassion. Compassion is a core virtue of all the world major religious and bedrock moral principle and professions like healthcare and social work. The distinguishing characteristics of compassion is shared suffering. Compassionate people and policies recognize suffering and take actions to alleviate it. According to French philosopher Andrew Comte Sponville, compassion means that one refuses to regard justice and patience. So, morally virtuous person means appropriate action it takes in its self-defense that is reasonable in intensity, duration, and magnitude to take for one's own use, illegally or without permission. Example, action speaks louder than words. When you act, it has more impact than when you speak only. For example, mas maayo na imuhang apilan og aksyon para mas effective or para mas makabot dyan mo ang imong gigusto. Parehas nang moingon ka na gusto ko mutabang. Yes, gusto ko mutabang. Pero nganong wa man ka milihok. So dapat kung imuhang gilitok, kabalusad ka mulihok, di ba? Parehas nang ako example dira being generosity. Manghatag og hinabang sa mga nabahaan, sa mga napikuhan sa kalamitan. Mao na siya morally virtuous, the kindness and willingness to share. Willingness to share. The kindness and willingness to share, or person willing to share that heart and soul to those people who will need it, their actions to say. So targets the methods. Also, a morally virtuous person also targeting the methods. So the rightness or wrongness of feelings, passions, and abilities lies in the degree of their application in a given situation, not in the person itself. So, moral virtue means, according to Aristotle, moral virtue is the only practical road to effective action. What the person of good character loves with right desire and thinks of as an end with right reason must first be perceived as beautiful. Hence, the virtuous person sees truly and judges rightly. Since beautiful things appear as they truly are only to a person of good character, it is only in the middle ground between habits of acting the principles of action that the soul can allow right desire and right reason to make their appearance as the direct and natural response of a free human being to the sight of the beautiful. So, for example, guys, kung na kay good moral and right ta, okay, ato lang ibutang nasa eskwelahan ha. Tas naa ka sa sulod sa room together with classmates and teachers. So, naisa ka classmates na bagsakuno na siya. So, but tomorrow is our final exam but ulahi jud kayo siya sa iyahang class as in. That's why nangita siya og way na para makapasar lang og maka-ready para og mana final exam. During recess time, guys, nakita na ko na nangudiguhat siya og kudigo para dili siya ma-zero sa exam. But because I saw here, that's why ako siyang giduol og gitaparan og giistoryahan og secret og kami rang duha na kanung og nakabalo sa iyang buhat. Ako siyang giingnan nga nganong mangudigo man ka nga sayon raman kayo ang leksyon ni ma'am. Kung naalang ka permisos kuha jud kayo to nimo ba. So ako siyang pamagi-pagi siya sa pagjoke-joke una para makuha na ko iyang atensyon. So, mo na nga, nangita ko way na dili siya makapangligo og gitabangan ako siya. Kaming duha, gadungan mi og tuon para sa exam ugma. So, kato akong gibuhat di ay guys, nagplay to siya og good moral virtues. Kaya wala na ko siya gipakaulawan, wala na ko siya gibulgar sa kadaghanan, but ako siyang gitabangan para mag-think positive siya og maganahan siya pagtuon. So guys, kung naaday tayo nakita, nabisan pag-unsa na sitwasyon, dapat di ay i-apply ni ang imong good moral virtue para makatabang ka. Kung ako siyang gipakaulawan guys or gibulgar or gikansyawan ba sa iyahang gibuhat do you think na ba ko'y good moral virtue na ginaga-apply? So wala, diba? So moral virtue is very important to us. Kung wala ta na guys, siguro dili na tatawo. I mean, wala na tay kaluoy, wala na tay kahadlok, or always na lang kahadlok. I mean, kung naa ka kay moral virtue nakabalo jud ka lutang sa paghandle or unsa ang angay pilion makabalo ta og unsay right or wrong. So, giingon diri na there is no good methods in something that is already considered a bad act. So, mao na to siya guys. So, wala dyan matawag na good methods kung sa action palang daan dili na maayo. Kay ang methods, base sa akong i-explain kay kanina na ang methods is the mean between two extremes which are excess and deficiency. So, ang methods kuno kay siya ang naa sa middle or center nga gipatung-an sa behavior or vices nga deficiency and excess. Meaning, balance ang imong pagdala sa imong actions, dili magkulang, dili pod manubra. Kung akong i-relate sa akong example kanina, ang akong example wala siya nagkulang. I mean, ako ang giduol akong classmates kay para tabangan sa hingsaktong pamaagi dili kay igo ra ako giduol walay nabuhat nga tabang then wala ra pod ko naglapas. So katong gibot guys, wala ko naglapas, wala ko nagkulang, balance ra siya. So meaning kung ano gihapon na siya, example ra gihapon siya sa methods guys. So kaya ang giingon dito ang moral virtuous person kay nag-target siya sa methods. So mao ni siya ang example. Kato akong example kanina nga gitabangan ako akong classmates, mo to siya example sa moral virtuous person. Then wala ra pud ko nang lapas sa akong pagtabang kay igo ra man ako siya gisabayan pagtuon og para ma-enjoy ba siya og dili siya makaunaw og pangaligo. Then para makaunaw sab siya positive ako siyang gitabangan pero wala ra sab ko nagpalabig tabang like ako na siyang pasunon kay over sab na wala na ako siya ipasuon kundi ako siyang gitabangan pamaagi sa pagtuon nagtuon ning duha para makakuha siya sa leksyon or sa exam dili siya man zero guys. So kanang imo magud siyang gipasuon guys kay nang lapas na kana dili na maayo kay useless ra gyapon ang imong pagtabang sa iha kay wala gyapon siya natun-an. So mo na guys, dapat kung natay makita nga klase kay na dapat dili nato siya pasunon or unsa katuan siyang tabangan pamaagi sa maayo nga pamaagi. Moral virtues and their vices. So mao ni na ako ikuanday guys nga gihimo diri mo ni siya ang virtues and their vices. So virtues and their vices. Guys, na ako ipakita sa inyo ang sphere of actions or feelings. Feelings ani nga mga behaviors. So ang fear and confidence sa excess is rashness. Sa mean, it is courage. Sa deficiency, it is cowardice. And another is pleasure and pain. So sa excess di ay, it means licentiousness. And sa mean, temperance. Then sa deficiency, insensibility. Another, getting and spending, minor. So sa excess, prodigality. Sa mean, liberality. And sa illiberality. So another behavior is getting and spending, major. Sa excess, parang siya vulgarity. And sa mean, magnificence. And sa deficiency is pettiness. And another, honor and dishonor, minor. So sa excess, vanity. Sa mean, magnanimity. And sa deficiency is pusillanimity. Then another is anger. So sa mean, irascibility. And then sa mean is patience. Then sa deficiency is lack of spirit. Then another is self-expression. Sa mean, boastfulness. I know, sa excess is boastfulness. And then sa mean, truthfulness. And then sa deficiency, understatement. Another is conversation. Sa excess buffoonery. And then sa mean, and then sa deficiency is boorishness. So another is the social conduct. So sa excess is obsequiousness. And the mean is friendliness. And sa deficiency, cantankerousness. And then another, shame. Sa excess is shyness. Sa mean is modesty. Sa deficiency is shamelessness. Then sa another, indignation. So sa excess is envy. Sa mean is righteous indignation. So sa deficiency is malicious superfluous with regard to manifesting manifesting a virtue is no longer an ethical act because one has gone beyond the middle. Therefore, one can always be excessive in her action but beyond the middle. So Aristotle defines moral virtue as a disposition to behave in the right manner and as a mean between extremes of deficiency and excess. Which are vices, we learn moral virtue primarily through habit and practice rather than through reasoning and instruction. Virtue is a matter of having the appropriate attitude toward pain and pleasure. For example, a coward will suffer and endure fear in the face of danger, whereas a rash person will not suffer sufficient fear. Aristotle lists the principal virtues along with their corresponding vices as represented in the following table. A virtuous person exhibits all of the virtues. They do not properly exist as distinct qualities but rather as different aspects of a virtuous life. So mao to ako ang katong gipakita na ko niya ganina guys. So mao to ang gimin ni Aristotle nga table. Nga Aristotle's principal virtues along with their corresponding vices, and as represented in the following table, a virtuous person exhibits all of the virtues. They do not properly exist as distinct qualities but rather as different aspects of a virtuous life. So, happiness is the highest good and the end at which all our activities ultimately aim. All our activities aim at some end. Through most of these ends are means toward other ends. For example, we go grocery shopping to buy food, but buying food is itself a means toward the end of eating well and thriftily. So, eating well and thriftily is also not an end in itself, but means to other ends. Only happiness is end in itself. So, it is the ultimate end and which all our activities aim. As such, it is the supreme good. The difficulty is that people don't agree on what makes for happy or good life. So the purpose of the ethics is to find an answer to this question. By its nature, the investigation is imprecise because there are so many variables involved when considering a person's life as a whole. So guys, ang pagiging superfluous patungkol sa pagpapakita ng isang kabutihan ay hindi na isang ethical dahil ang isa ay lumampas sa gitna. Sa mga katuwid ay isa ay maraming palaging labis sa kanyang aksyon, ngunit lampas sa gitna. So guys, maura to ako ang ma-discuss about methods and moral virtues. So let Sheena how continue the summary of methods and moral virtues. Thank you guys.
Summary. Character, virtue, ethics is a person rather than action-based. It looks at the virtue or moral character of the person carrying out an action, rather than at ethical duties and roles or consequence of particular actions. A good person is someone who lives virtuously, who possesses and lives the virtues. So the character is a person rather than action-based. And virtue. Virtue is a moral excellence. A virtue is a trait or quality that is deemed to be morally good and thus is valued as a foundation of principle and good moral being. So virtue is a moral excellence and virtue traits and or quality as a person vices. Example, arrogance. While the people should take pride in their work and feel proud of their accomplishment, pride taken to the extreme can become arrogance. People who are arrogant tend to have an elevated sense or self-worth, leading them to believe they are better than people. So the example of vices is arrogance, like feel proud, pride, and extreme become arrogance. Virtue ethics. Virtue ethics are attitude, disposition, or character traits that enable us to be and to act in ways that develop this potential. They enable us to pursue the ideals we have adopted: honestly, courage, compassion, generosity, fidelity, integrity, fairness, self-control, and prudence are all examples of virtue. So the example of virtue is honesty, courage, compassion, generosity, fidelity, integrity, fairness, and self-control. Eudaimonia, based on older Greek tradition, was used as term of the highest human good, and so it is the aim of practical philosophy, including ethics and political philosophy, to consider and also experience what it really is and how it can be achieved. Excuse me. Telos is a term used by philosopher Aristotle to refer to the full potential or inherent purpose on object of a person or thing. Misot. The measure of the center is a major element in the definition of human virtues in Aristotle Nicomachean Ethics. On the one hand, the principle of misot often is described as powerful. On the other hand, the implement of this principle to certain problems seems to state non-satisfying solution. Arete is the concept in ancient Greek that thought that in its the most basic sense refers to excellence of any kind. The term may also mean moral virtue. Practical wisdom has an ethical virtue known eudaimonia, which is capacity to act based on reasoning with regard to things that are good or bad for humanity. What is a good life? Aristotle rubrics. What is a good life? Aristotle answer. Good instrumental. Happiness, eudaimonia. Telos and goal purpose. Virtue, errate. Moral, intellectual. So that's all of my report. Thank you and goodbye.
So I have here a video for virtue and ethics so that we will be able to much understand what is it. So I hope you will watch this video.
Virtue ethics. Virtue ethics is a philosophy developed by Aristotle and other ancient Greeks. It is the quest to understand and live a life of moral character. This character-based approach to morality assumes that we acquire virtue through practice. By practicing being honest, brave, just, generous, and so on, a person develops an honorable and moral character. According to Aristotle, by honing virtuous habits, people will likely make the right choice when faced with ethical challenges. To illustrate the difference among three key moral philosophies, ethicists Mark White and Robert Arp refer to the film The Dark Knight, where Batman has the opportunity to kill the Joker. Utilitarians, White and Arp suggest, would endorse killing the Joker. By taking this one life, Batman could save multitudes. Deontologists, on the other hand, would reject killing the Joker simply because it's wrong to kill. But a virtue ethicist would highlight the character of the person who kills the Joker. Does Batman want to be the kind of person who takes his enemies' lives? No. In fact, he doesn't. So, virtue ethics helps us understand what it means to be a virtuous human being. And it gives us a guide for living life without giving us specific rules for resolving ethical dilemmas.
So, alright, I assume that you nasabtan ninyo ang video because it's very self-explanatory since ang nag-explain is ang iyang explanation is very clear. So I think that would be all. Thank you for listening, and God bless. Stay safe, stay healthy, and always be happy. Bye bye.